And good day, good night. Welcome to World Cup Today. It's Monday, June 11th, week of the World Cup. Yes, it starts in about 3 evening from now. Russia, Saudi Arabia on Thursday, and teams are arriving in Russia. We'll talk about some news today, some MLS news. A lot of MLS news. We'll talk about this. But Duane, first of all, teams are arriving in Russia as we speak, and when we look in the history, teams usually got there a bit earlier. I'm still shocked that teams like Egypt and Argentina, Serbia, Portugal just arrived basically in Russia last few days.
Yeah, well, we were talking a bit off air about this. It's probably a case of a couple things. First off, I mean, we all notoriously know that outside of the city centers, and I think we got to be clear that the city centers are going to be fine, but outside of the city centers, the stadium areas, some of Russia could be a little dodgy, and I think that avoiding trying to get your players in there early is probably a good idea. Also, when you're talking about Brazil, you're talking about a lot of heat that the European nations in particular aren't used to. When you're talking about a World Cup that's held at altitude, you'd want to get used to that. Situations like that are something that you want to get in there early for. But with Russia, you don't really need to do that. So you might as well keep your players somewhere where you're a little more comfortable a little longer.
Yeah, and Monday being garbage day around Toronto. I guess that's what we're hearing right now.
There's construction next door, so I don't know what. This just started. Anyway.
We'll see what we can do. But when we're looking at Russia, the fact that they don't necessarily want to stay there as long as possible might explain this. So we'll see what happens in the next few days and how teams do arrive and adjust in Russia. So first ball being kicked around Thursday night in Russia. So that will be a fascinating Russia-Saudi Arabia. But let's start with our news of the day. Big news grabbing the headlines this morning. Like we all knew it, Patrick Vieira is going to Nice, French Riviera. Oh, it was nice to see you, Patrick. But now, Patrick, he's going to coach a team, up-and-coming team. But I think it's more than just a team. It's the surroundings. It's everything included. What comes with coaching Ligue 1 and Nice. But it's still surprising, a coach leaving a team in MLS mid-season, and not because of a bad performance. It's just because of another opportunity. What does it say about NYCFC? What does it say about MLS when not the best team in Ligue 1 comes calling and the call is taken?
Well, I think it shouldn't say anything about MLS in terms of anyone who sensibly watches it and knows exactly where it stands in the world. I know there are a lot of people out there. What's my old saying? MLS is simultaneously the most overrated and underrated league in the world. There are people out there that think it's a pub league, and that's stupid. And there are people out there that think it's better than Ligue 1. Also not that bright. So I don't think it says anything. I think what it might say, though, is that it's an opportunity that Patrick Vieira looks at and sees as something that's a stepping stone to get him up to the level where he feels that he is ready to manage a team like Arsenal in the future, or Manchester City, or whoever, Bayern Munich. It doesn't matter. A big, big club. This is a very thoughtful man who, all through his career, has done it by a ladder. He's gone up the ladder. He hasn't tried to climb the mountain in one pull. He's been trying to go up slowly. Now, you can argue that there are players that have had massive success immediately. Zidane jumps to mind. What manager, if he never manages again, is going to say that he's never not won the Champions League, right?
Well, Duane, but you would have put a Cone instead of Zidane, and there's a 75% chance you would have had the same results.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, so I don't think it says anything about anything. What it might be interesting talking about, of course, for our audience, is what does it mean for NYCFC? This is a team that's doing very well right now. This is a team that that Vieira has shaped a little bit, has been a massive part of, and now they're suddenly going to have to find someone to take over. Now, I suspect that they will just shift things and keep things as stable for this season as possible. But he was probably a big big part of attracting people there.
Yeah.
You know, it's a pretty star-struck thing when Patrick Vieira is your manager, and that's going to help in attracting free agents. It's going to help to attracting, just even having people buy into a plan. And now that's gone, and I doubt they're going to have someone of the same stature come in. It'd be very difficult to imagine who. Does Zidane want to come to New York?
No. Zidane playing on a 60 by 11 pitch? I don't think that's going to happen. But there's a few names we're going to start to come up later today in the next few days. And in the last sentence of the press release that NYCFC sent out today in the Patrick Vieira, thank you, Patrick. Last sentence is, there'll be an announcement shortly in the next few days, according to who's going to take over, who's going to be the head coach situation. Do you go international again? Do you go and find another coach that might be able to come in and maybe have an a period of adaptation like Patrick Vieira had? Let's not forget the first few weeks and months were not easy. His discovery period was not necessarily easy, but then he understood the league, was able to adapt his managing style to the player he had, bring in player, develop player. He was an educator in the development of a few great players, Harrison in example. So you do have a great resume there. So who do you bring? You bring someone for the outside and maybe have to wait again and maybe throw this season away with the adaptation period in the second half? Or do you go more the American route? Do you go like a name who's been said many, many times, and I'm sure we're going to start to hear from this name over the next 2 days? Tab Ramos, maybe. Or maybe you go to LAFC with Mark Dos Santos waiting in the line back to Bob Bradley for an opportunity. I think Tab Ramos might be the favorite in my mind, but I'm still an outsider's perspective here.
Well, I think that probably my favorite is Mr. Interim is likely how they're going to go with this, and you can probably look at their assistants and who on that list is the most experienced, most ready to go. Javier Perez, maybe. I don't know. You'd have to someone closer to NYCFC would have a better idea than those of us a little bit on the outside. But just go to nycfc.com/coaching staff or something, I suspect, and you'll find the answer to your question for the rest of this year. I think it's kind of silly to not do a full search. We've seen teams do this before. Patrick Vieira may have given them time, because he does have the time. Maybe he said for a month, let's do the search. That's possible. But I think more would have leaked, other than the rumors that initially were shot down, if they were actually doing a full search, because they leak. Stuff like that happens. I suspect, as I said, what's going to happen is that they will go, okay, we got a World Cup for a month. We've got a bit of a break. He's going to step aside now. He's going to get himself settled back over there. We're going to put an interim in for now that will allow us to continue to do the same things that we're doing for the next couple of weeks, because they're really just training for the next little while, right? Like after the break starts, so they're just really training. And then they come back in a couple of weeks down the road, and even if you have that assistant coach who's been part of the project from the get-go around there for a month, 2 months until the World Cup ends, and maybe you do another worldwide search, then I don't think there's any problem there. I mean, the other place you might find an answer to this, how did they find Vieira? Wasn't on the MLS side of things. It was in Manchester, so that's another possibility.
Well, what's the relationship between Nice and Manchester? It's not like it's the first time. There's a lot of working relationships there, so that to keep an eye on. But if you're Manchester City, if you're the City Group, to be quite precise, does this feel like Patrick Vieira, your project, leaving the fold? Or maybe, if you use an analogy of a player, he's going out on loan to gather more experience, and he'll come back to coach a first team at some time down the road. Which one is it, Duane? Duane. We have lost Duane. We're going to try to get Duane back online as soon as possible. But that's what I'm wondering. Is it Vieira leaving City? Or is it Vieira going out on loan? We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with some more news.
голубчик, печальная жизнь мне без тебя. Дай на прощание обещание, что не разлюбишь ты меня. Скажи ты мне, что любишь меня, что любишь меня. Скажи ты мне, что любишь ты меня. Когда порой тебя не вижу, грустно задумчиво сижу.
We'll be right back soon. We're getting Duane back on the line. But there's other news as well that has been coming out. As much as Patrick Vieira leaving for Nice has been talked about over the last few weeks, and there was a lot of rumors. There's been rumors since January that Jesse Marsch, head coach of New York Red Bulls, of course, and he's linked with Salzburg. He's been linked with the Red Bull Salzburg for a while now, and there's more and more truth to those rumors. And we have Duane back on the line. Duane, as much as Vieira leaving NYCFC is surprising and not at the same time, Jesse Marsch might be on his way out as well. Austria might be the destination for Jesse Marsch.
We talk about the advantages and disadvantages of having, these multi-team sort of situations. Players can come in and out as they seem to, or managers in this case can come in and out. I think Marsch would be a worse loss than Vieira in many ways. I think because, the City Football Group, sort of NYCFC is sort of a more established project at this point in my mind, whereas I think the Red Bulls are in a big way a product of Marsch and his leadership and his direction. So if that were to happen, that could be a much more serious situation for the Red Bulls than it might be for NYCFC. So interesting times in New York. Might have to get Michael on when we put a focus back on New York.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the next Hudson River Derby could be with two new managers. And that's like very interesting. And both teams are not bad. And it's kind of a weird mix for the Eastern Conference to have two teams that are like in the upper echelon having new managers during the season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, here's the evolution of MLS. And we talk about this all the time on the player side of things. I think that people have to get used to the idea that it is now a jumping off point, and that is actually an evolution in the league. I'm not the first person to say this. This is hardly an original thought, but it is true, and this could be more evidence of it, that you have a manager like Vieira that comes from away, gets some training here, leaves to go to a higher level, and Ligue 1 is a higher level. Is Austria a higher level? That's a bigger debate, but probably. So that's I think that it's a good thing that these things are being looked at, and away we go.
Yeah, away we go. The other big news that we were made aware of in the last few days is the interest in Alphonso Davies from Besiktas, and it's not necessarily a surprise. It's not necessarily something that is shocking when we know that Cal Aaron plays for Besiktas, Atiba Hutchinson plays for Besiktas. Besiktas does have some times in their schedule to look at Canadian prospect, obviously, and has connections to attract them. And it's kind of easier to make the transition when you attract maybe a Alphonso Davies. Look, come play with your national team brothers in Cal Aaron and Atiba Hutchinson. Atiba making sure that Besiktas knows about the wonder kid that Alphonso Davies is. And it's kind of interesting. He had the game of his life so far this weekend. Best performance I've ever seen from him in Major League Soccer. And we're hearing rumors from Turkey. This is not coming from here. This is coming straight from very close to the team. And it's going to be interesting in December. In November, he turns 18. And in January, in the offseason, we might see a move for Alphonso Davies.
Yeah, well, he can't move until he's 18, of course. But, Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if our listeners are, well, many of them will be, especially our American listeners, will remember when Fulham was USA, USA and England, right? That it was all these American players who come and have success there, and it sort of fed itself. Besiktas is somehow now becoming a place where Canadian players may be able to go and find some success. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good development to have. Some Canadian listeners might be thinking, I'd like to see Davies, go to a higher level. But I think that the Turkish league, in many, many ways, if they can get used to the culture shock that might be, then
it's not just the Turkish league, though. It's the Champions League. It's not about the Turkish league. You know what I mean? It's Besiktas is bigger than the Turkish league in a way. So I think there's value there. It's a European club, part of the European Champions League, and if not Europa League, which is not too shabby either. So I think that's what it's all about. It's the stepping stone to the bigger club after. Besiktas is maybe the gateway to Europe now, the gateway to a tier 1 club.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying. I mean, look, there's little doubt that you're going to be viewed more by a bigger club. And when I say bigger club, I could be talking about the biggest clubs in the world, but I think the biggest clubs in the world are almost more willing to take bigger chances because they have more resources. They can afford to make a mistake. Even if you're talking about like a mid-level Premier League club, a mid-level Bundesliga club, a mid-level La Liga club, I think that they're a little less willing to take a risk on a player from some outpost in their mind like Canada, but they would look at the same player that's been playing at Besiktas, a club that's playing in the Champions League, and go, yeah, obviously he's going to fit in. You know what I mean? Like it opens up more opportunities. If the talent's there, the biggest clubs in the world will find that talent, and they will take the role at it regardless because, again, resources matter, and if they screw it up, then, well, whatever. They have another, it's like pocket change for them, so it's not a real big deal. It's look at Balou in Barcelona. It's not a big risk for them to bring a guy like that into Barcelona B. It's just really they're rolling the dice and seeing what they have, and worst case scenario they sell them on to another club in Europe and recoup their losses. So this is in every way on a football sense would be a good move for Davies. The only caveat I would give to it would be obviously on a personal level, you got to make sure that the fit's right for you, and only he and the people around him can really speak to that.
Yeah, and his qualities, though, when I was watching him play this weekend, a great performance, great goal, and great assist, 2 assists, a goal. Probably his best game ever I've ever seen him play, and he's really growing into his own and understanding his role now, and knowing the full extent of his capabilities, not being afraid to now go on runs, taking on defenders, overtaking defenders like it's nothing, just going on net, finding Rena, and there's a score, there's a goal. Those qualities are transferable, right? The qualities of a winger to have pace and to be able to overtake a defender. Doesn't matter what tactics you play, doesn't matter what defensive role you're given or not. If you're able to do this, which is running at defenders and overtaking them with your pace and quality, those qualities are transferable. Those qualities will show up with Besiktas.
No, for sure. Look, Alphonso Davies is not long for Vancouver. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. Probably the biggest question I would have about this potential transfer wouldn't really come from Besiktas' interests. I think that's probably legit. I think it comes from Vancouver's willingness to sell at the price that Besiktas is willing to pay. That would be the question I would have. And we saw that with the Kyle Laurens saga, which ultimately led to him forcing the move, as we well know. Stuff I was hearing, stuff those of us in Canada were hearing behind the scenes, paint Lauren in a much nicer picture than what he got painted by in Orlando, certainly, and in MLS in general, based on what was happening there. And it had to do with just the willingness of MLS to accept what probably was a fair market offer that they were getting from Besiktas. And Besiktas is not a club with ultimate, resources, as I was talking about a minute ago. So are they able to pay, this outlandish fee that perhaps the Whitecaps are looking for in this particular case?
And what's funny though? Because it's with Whitecaps, with Vancouver Whitecaps in Canada and not in Orlando or not an American city, the rules are a bit different from the money, right? From the transfer and how that money will trickle down to maybe FC Edmonton too, because they developed Davies in a way, and the smaller club around the Edmonton region that Davies was part of. they might see some money down the line just because of the rights and the discovery rights that were sold and kept over the last few transfers that Davies had. So because it's Canada and there's a precedent with those rights being paid to the smaller soccer associations, we might see FC Edmonton have a boost for their upcoming first season in the Canadian Premier League with a little check from Alphonso Davies' transfer.
Yeah, for those American listeners that aren't completely aware of what Kevin's referring to, it's in Canada, the solidarity fees, which you're seeing some of the big youth clubs in the United States are essentially taking legal action to obtain, and are being told no, they won't get them from MLS and from the MLSPU more pointedly. They are paid in Canada. They've been paid. We have direct evidence of them being paid here. This isn't speculation. We know that the Daniel Henry transfer to West Ham a few years ago. And speaking of which, good for Daniel Henry. He did great in Ottawa, and he's looking pretty good in Vancouver so far. It's nice to see that back on. Hopefully he can stay healthy. But that aside, we know that his club, North Mississauga, received a solidarity payment. I've got that directly from the source. I worked with North Mississauga quite a bit in the last couple of years, so I know from which I'm speaking of here. This is not unnamed sources stuff. So yeah, that's a possibility as well. Could be the first transfer, the first financial transfer, business dealings of the Canadian Premier League could actually, beyond the franchise fees, could be a transfer from the second hand. That'd be kind of funny, but yeah, it's I wonder. Here's the dilemma you have when you're a selling league. And we've established that MLS is a selling league, and on maybe not just a player standpoint at this point, is at what point do you have to make a decision where maybe you take a little less money because it's in the best interest of the player, and in turn, that's in the best interest of yourself because you want to be a place that players of that talent are willing to come develop at. If you hold a player back, and this is what Orlando fans that I was trying to get through to you when we were talking about Kyle Larin, and you were saying, well, he's our player, he's under contract, and he has to play here if we want him to. Well, you're just cutting off your nose to spite your face. That's the old adage that you talk about in these situations. That's you got to be careful about that. It's a fine line. You don't want to get screwed over. You don't want to be seen as a team that's willing to just give the players away, of course. And when we talk about team, we're talking about league in this case too. Obviously, there's a factor there, but yeah, this is a decision that I think that you have to be willing to let go a little bit, and it's a hard mental jump for MLS and for MLS teams to make, and MLS fans to make, even though we logically know that this is the next stage of the evolution of the league. Emotionally, we're all still North American sports fans for the most part of other sports. And the idea of our other teams just giving players away to better teams somewhere else is obscure to us, right? Even if we're long-term soccer fans. So this is a mental hurdle that we need to get over. But I think we all, particularly in this country where we don't have the same emotional attachment to MLS, want to see this happen sooner rather than later.
Let's move our focus now to Russia a bit. World Cup starts on Thursday. World Cup today. This show will be live every day. At 10 a.m. or close to 10 a.m., 10 minutes after the first game of the day during the World Cup, starting Friday. On Thursday, of course, the game is a bit of different timing. So, Russia. We've seen Olympics in Russia not too long ago, and we've seen the ramification of those Olympics in the doping wars, in the doping world, anti-doping world, or doping world. It's the same thing, anti or anti-doping, right? Speaking of Icarus. This is the best movie I've seen in a while. It changed my perspective, and it has a legacy. What is the legacy of Icarus and Sochi compared to the World Cup? The thing is, there's not many different sports. There's only one Russian team. Is there a danger of doping for this one Russian team? And I want to say the caveat here that it's not fair for those players to have this on them. But in the past, we know it was written, this Football Federation of Russia was outside of the organized doping scandal. So did that change? Is there a risk? What is the legacy of Icarus when it comes to Russia 2018?
Yeah, but quickly before I get into that, Kevin, I don't want to terrify you, but today is the first day of 46 straight days we're going to podcast. So good luck.
Yeah,
Anyway,
but I do shows Monday to Friday. I usually do a show on Saturday too, and I usually do a show on Sunday. So just the same.
Yeah, it just means Sunday is probably the only difference there. But yeah, Icarus. If you haven't seen the movie Icarus, it's on Netflix. Highly recommended. Deals with the Sochi Olympics, everything that went down there, systematic doping violations that happened. One of the best documentaries, one of the best sports documentaries ever produced. It's almost 2 documentaries in one. Kevin and I did a full show on 5 rings. Go back and listen to that if you want to hear more information, then watch the movie or do vice versa. It doesn't matter. Just an excellent demonstration of systematic cheating in sports. But in terms of what it means for a World Cup, as you say, yeah, there's only one Russian team. So no, I do not think you will see doping at the World Cup, or we've seen doping in the lead up to the World Cup for the Russian national team, largely because these players all are professionals with careers and aspirations that go beyond the national team. A little bit different. If you look back to Sochi, and one of the things that we have come out since then is that there were only 2 sports in the Russian Federation that were spared this doping sort of program. One of them was Mr. Ovechkin, Stanley Cup champion, and his, and the Russian national hockey players, because it would put their professional careers at risk to put them as part of this program. So I don't think that you're going to see the soccer team doing the same thing as well.
Party like Ovechkin is now something, I wish I was partying like Ovechkin. Duane, he's all of us. He's probably like any one of us if we'd ever win a cup and we're not supposed to. Like, imagine right now I win the Stanley Cup. Guess what? I'm partying in Vegas, in the city I'm from, for like 4 straight days, no sleep, bathing in fountains if I have to. Yeah, he's all of us.
Yeah, it's been quite the ride. It was a long day. We talked about it Friday, so we'll move on. But no, the point I'm making is that they're not going to risk their professional career for that. So they're not doping their soccer team. First off, I don't think it would really matter. There's not much they could do in even the 4 or 5 years that they do. The technical issues are issue there, not their fitness.
It's hard to put skills in a syringe, Yeah. Being able to nutmeg players, you can't really put that in the syringe and then inject it to a player. It's hard to show a guy how to think with a syringe. So no, I know that.
Yeah, you can add VO2 capacity. You can't add the ability to do a step over, so to speak. Right?
But if you can't kick the ball, guess what? You're not going to be able to kick the ball better, even if you're stronger. It's just going to be like worse because the ball's going to get out of the stadium.
Yes. But to get back on, yeah, exactly. So, no, they're not doped. But to get back on track here, I think the risk you would run, and what I would be concerned about if I was watching this tournament, is other types of manipulation that might take place. Now, we got to be careful about this. The World Cup, if you look at its entire history, there are suspicious results out there. There are suspicious results dating all the way back to the results of 1978. That
Korea, 2002, Italy. Sorry, I had something in my throat.
Perhaps, yes, exactly. There are lots of suspicious results out there. So that would be my concerns. We have VAR involved in this as well, which even adds a layer to this. So does VAR help reduce the possibility of these situations?
Dallas on Saturday, Montreal, when Dallas's goal was about offside by a foot, VAR said it was good. VAR is not always right, apparently. So MLS even this morning mentioned to head coach Rémi Garde that yes, VAR did make a mistake on Saturday. So that bodes well for the World Cup. Yeah,
well, I read a report today that said that an independent study found that VAR has increased the success rate from 93%. They, looked at, I guess, 1,000 games with referees' decisions, without VAR and 1,000 games with it, and they found there's a 93% correctness rate in those games without, and there was a 97.8 or something percent correct rate in games with. So it does increase it, but it does not make it 100%. But when you're talking about cheating, though, you're talking about, that game in 2002. If in fact you believe, and we have no proof of this, no one has any proof of this, that there was some manipulation happening there to ensure that the hosts had a successful World Cup, you would also have to include more people involved in that conspiracy for that to happen. So it's not impossible that you could all continue to do manipulation, but maybe this is the one positive that I can convince myself of VAR is it might help reduce incidents of referee manipulation, which is what we're talking about really, and what I'm most concerned about when it comes to Russia. But here's the other part of it, though, Kevin, and I've been reading quite a bit on the Russian side of things in the last day or so in terms of what it's going to be like to be over there. And I have friends that are going to be over there, and I do actually believe, both in Russia and Qatar, despite the fact that there's a lot of reservations about it, rightfully so, that the actual World Cups themselves are going to go off for the fans that are there pretty well. I don't think there's going to be any problems for people that are going to Russian stadiums, that are hanging out in Russian fan zones, that are traveling in the typical tourist central city areas, going to, look at the big statues and pretty churches in Russia. No one's going to run into any problems.
No, it's going to be a spectacle, right? Russia's going to put on a show and do all sense of the word, and they control what you see. So from your experience, from your perspective, it's going to be one hell of a month.
Yeah. Anyone that gets himself into problems is probably going to wander into places that no tourist would ever wander into unless they were looking to find problems. This is kind of my opinion on this, and I think that the Russian folks are pretty committed to trying to use this World Cup to enhance their image worldwide, and they're also smart enough on a sporting well. And say what you want about the Russians in sport, they've been successful at it. They know how to target the right athletes to get the best results, to maximize their potential. They know that this team, there's a joke in Russia I read today that it's a joke, so to speak, is that Russian fans are walking around going, so who are you going to support in the second round? Like, they're aware of where their team stands. They do not believe that this is a team capable of going deep in this tournament. So any result, even into the round of 16, is going to be viewed as a success. They don't accept the World Cup championship out of this. So they're not, I don't think, going to be motivated to do extreme things like they did in the Winter Olympics, which, they reasonably could have expected to do very well in, and did do very well in, especially with, we know how now, but certainly they were able to translate that into success, where, as we said a minute ago, you can't put skill in a syringe. So it's not going to do the same thing here. So why bother? Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to make sure that their cities are clean, and that their tourist attractions are popping, and that the volunteers are speaking good English, and that it's going to be a good time for people there. And
that the vodka is flowing. And that will for sure be a staple of the 2018 World Cup. Live daily right here, Duane, at 10 a.m. or close to it, depending on what time the first game stops. You can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, and myself at Kev Laramee. We'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. with some more World Cup talk. Tomorrow it's going to be our predictions show. We're getting ready today, Duane. Have you got your bracket out yet? Have you started to figure out who's going to get out? Have you started to become Professor Duane yet?
I'm 90% sure who I'm going to pick.
That's not bad.
90.
90. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'm not there yet, but today is going to be my research for my prediction tomorrow. Prediction show right here on World Cup Today, 10 a.m. You can follow us on social media at Soccer Today SPN, at 24th Minute for Duane, at Kev Laramee for myself. Subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/Sports Podcasting Network, and on our podcatchers. Anywhere you get your podcasts, make sure you subscribe to either Soccer Today, to Five Rings, to any way you can get World Cup Today. Make sure you do so. And until next time, as always, have a great soccer.